The 35-year murder conviction of Karmelo Anthony has entered a highly charged phase outside the courtroom. I want you to really picture what is happening right now. His parents, Kala Hayes and Andrew Anthony, have officially broken their silence. They are sitting down on national media outlets, places like the Breakfast Club and CBS News, and they are launching a direct challenge against the student witness testimonies that ultimately decided this verdict. The family claims the public record completely misinterprets what actually happened inside that track meet tent. Meanwhile, online commentators are actively debating the physical mechanics of the altercation. But what did the witnesses actually state under oath? How many people testified? What did the forensic medical examiner prove? And how do the trial records clash with the parents' new public accounts? Today, we are stripping away the social media noise. We are analyzing the exact witness counts, the sequence of the physical escalation, and the structural evidence used by the court. Let's look at the facts. If you want to track every update on this trial and others, please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases right now. Let's get back to it. You know, when you sit down and look at a case like this, you have to start by acknowledging the absolute human tragedy at its core. A 17-year-old boy, Austin Metcalf, went to a high school track meet and never came home. His family is grieving a loss that no parent should ever have to face in their lifetime. And on the other side, you have a 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony, who is now sentenced to spend the next 35 years of his life in a state penitentiary. Two families are completely shattered. Wow. It is just a heavy, incredibly sad reality. I want us to keep that empathy and respect for Austin's family at the forefront as we talk through this. We are not here to take sides or create emotional lies to make a better story. We are just here to look at what the court said, what the police said, and what the parents are saying right now on television. Right, so let's look directly at the public position taken by Karmelo Anthony's parents. Speaking on these massive national platforms, Andrew Anthony and Kala Hayes maintained that their son did not initiate the encounter with any lethal intent. I listened to their interviews, and they are incredibly adamant about this point. They stated that Karmelo did not arrive at that stadium with malicious plans. In their eyes, he was a teenager who got caught in a sudden, terrifying situation. The parents pointed directly to specific courtroom testimonies to back this up. They stated that surveillance media, which was discussed during the trial, captures their son fleeing the tent and running toward a school teacher for safety immediately after the physical altercation. I see why this specific point is so crucial to their public argument. According to the parents' account, this specific teacher took the stand under oath and testified that he had to physically hold back another individual. This other student was allegedly attempting to pursue Karmelo right after the fatal incident took place. The parents are arguing that the final verdict did not properly weigh this retreat behavior. Think about that for a second. If a person is running away toward an adult for protection, the parents are asking the public, does that look like the behavior of someone who went there looking for a fight? Or does that look like someone who was terrified for his own life? This specific interpretation forms a core pillar of their public push as they actively seek new legal counsel to review the case files. Now, they have publicly stated that the narrative established by the prosecution during the trial relied on witness accounts that simply lacked context. In their media appearances, Kala Hayes and Andrew Anthony asserted that their son was acting purely out of self-preservation. They described a rapidly deteriorating situation inside that crowded team tent during the severe rainstorm. They argued that the physical environment was inherently hostile toward their son, both during the confrontation and in the chaotic seconds right after it. By pointing to the teacher's documented testimony regarding the pursuit, the family argues that Karmelo was the one being hunted, not the other way around. But we have to look at both sides of this. We have to look at what the court records actually show, because the prosecution and the victim's family see this entirely differently. Austin's father, Jeff Metcalf, has spoken out, and the Metcalf family firmly believes that the jury got it exactly right. They rely on what the police said and what the official trial transcripts documented. According to the prosecution, the witness testimonies from the students under the tent were consistent, detailed, and devastating. The court said that while Austin Metcalf did initiate physical contact by shoving or grabbing Karmelo to get him out of the rival team's tent, Karmelo's response was a severe, non-proportional escalation. The police records note that Karmelo produced a folding knife and struck a single fatal blow, right? So the core of the legal debate here is about proportionality and intent. The parents are essentially saying, look at the teacher's testimony, look at how my son was chased. They want the world to realize that the moments after the stabbing are just as important as the moments during it, because it shows their son was in a hostile environment where he felt totally outnumbered. They claim the jury missed the bigger picture because they relied too heavily on the teenage witnesses who might have been biased toward their own teammate. But the prosecution argued, and the court ultimately agreed, that the danger Karmelo faced did not legally justify the use of lethal force. When you introduce a deadly weapon into an unarmed pushing match, Texas law has strict boundaries on what is considered self-defense. Justice said that an unarmed shove does not give you the right to end a life. The Collin County medical examiner testified to a single unsurvivable wound. The state argued this was a sudden and lethal escalation against an unarmed teenager who was just telling someone to leave a tent. My heart just aches for the Metcalf family when I think about this current media tour. Imagine losing your 17-year-old son, going through the grueling, exhausting process of a murder trial, listening to the medical examiner describe the fatal wound in a cold courtroom, waiting for the jury to deliberate, and finally getting a guilty verdict. You think you finally have some closure. You think justice has been served. But then you turn on the television, and the parents of the boy who killed your son are on national news, challenging the very witness testimonies that put him behind bars. That has to be an agonizing experience for Jeff Metcalf and his family. They have stated clearly that they want the public to respect the jury's decision. They trust what the police said, they trust what the court said, and they believe the right outcome was reached based on the verified facts of the investigation. And that is exactly where the tension lies in this update. We are watching two completely different interpretations of the exact same event play out in real time. The witnesses, the students who were huddled in that tent to escape the rain, testified that Karmelo was asked to leave. He refused, said, "Touch me and see what happens," and then stabbed Austin when Austin grabbed him. That is the timeline the police said happened. That is the timeline the court accepted as the absolute truth. But Karmelo's parents are saying those student witnesses lacked context and that the public does not have the full story. They are arguing that the environment was already hostile before any words were even exchanged. They believe the student witnesses were protecting their own hut, and that the only truly objective witness was the adult teacher who saw the immediate aftermath and had to step in to stop a further attack on Karmelo. It is a fascinating and deeply complex legal strategy when you really break it down. By focusing on the teacher's testimony and the surveillance footage of the retreat, Kala Hayes and Andrew Anthony are trying to build an appellate case in the court of public opinion before they even get back into a real courtroom. They want a higher court to look at this and say, yes, the jury was so focused on the stabbing itself that they ignored the hostile environment that forced the defendant's hand. Wow. It makes you realize just how complicated the justice system can be when emotions and witness memories are involved. But overturning a jury verdict based on witness credibility is incredibly difficult. An appellate court usually looks for errors in how the law was applied by the judge, not whether the jury believed the right witnesses. The jury's job is to decide who is telling the truth. So as Karmelo's parents seek new legal counsel, this media campaign seems to be about getting people to question the narrative just as much as it is about laying the groundwork for a formal legal appeal. They are fighting for their son's life, while the Metcalf family is fighting to protect the justice they already won for Austin. The trial may be over, but as we can clearly see, the fight for the truth is still going on. To really evaluate why the jury reached their decision, we must step away from the current media debates and break down the exact sequence of the physical escalation. We have to look at how this was presented in the courtroom by the witnesses and the official police files. I want to take you back to that specific afternoon. You have to understand the environment to understand how quickly things went wrong. The confrontation took place during a heavy, sudden downpour. It was a high school track meet, which is usually just a loud, busy, normal day. But when the rain started pouring down, everyone scrambled for cover. You had multiple student athletes from both rival schools crowded together inside and around the immediate perimeter of a single school athletic tent. Just picture that for a second. It is loud, it is raining, teenagers are packed into a tight space, and adrenaline from the track meet is already running high. It was a recipe for tension, but nobody could have predicted how fatal it was about to become. According to sworn witness statements given to the police, Austin Metcalf approached Karmelo Anthony and told him to leave the rival team's tent. Now, court records show that Anthony did not deny that this verbal instruction occurred. He did not dispute that he was told to leave. Instead, witnesses testified that Anthony responded with a very specific phrase. He looked at Austin and said, "Touch me and see what happens." Wow. When you hear a phrase like that, it completely changes the temperature of the room. The prosecution leaned heavily on those words during the trial, arguing that it showed a clear, verbalized threat right before the physical violence happened. The record shows that Austin Metcalf then went first in making physical contact. He grabbed Anthony to manually remove him from the tent. He was trying to push him out that specific area. According to the eyewitness accounts, that is the exact millisecond everything changed forever. The moment Austin grabbed him, Anthony produced a folding pocket knife. He delivered a single stab wound directly to Austin's chest and then immediately ran from the tent. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. Crime Cases, please hit that button right now so we can keep bringing you these deep, factual court breakdowns, right? So let's get back to the timeline. A major question online right now, especially after the parents' recent interviews, centers on how many people actually testified to this sequence. People want to know if the jury was just taking the word of one or two kids who might have been biased. But during the course of the trial, more than a dozen witnesses took the stand. We are talking about multiple student athletes who were standing just feet away when it happened. We are talking about school officials, and we are talking about the responding police officers. Think about how heavy that is. Imagine being a high school student, sitting on a witness stand in a quiet courtroom and having to recount the exact moment a life was taken right in front of you. I see how difficult that must have been for everyone involved. The court utilized these consistent student testimonies to establish a very strict chronological timeline of the altercation. The state did not just rely on one perspective. They built a mosaic of accounts from the people who were trapped in that tent with them. What is really interesting from a legal standpoint is how the defense handled this. Anthony's defense team did not cross-examine the witnesses to deny the underlying fact that the physical contact occurred. They did not try to argue that Austin never grabbed him. Instead, they focused entirely on the context of the threat. They wanted the jury to look at the hostility of the environment, the chaos of the tent, and the fear their client might have felt being surrounded by a rival team. They argued sudden passion and self-defense, hoping the jury would understand why a smaller teenager might panic in that crowded space. But the prosecution had to verify the physical mechanics of the attack. They could not just rely on what the teenagers saw in a split second. They needed absolute medical proof. So, to verify exactly how it happened, the prosecution entered the forensic logs of the chief medical examiner into evidence. When the medical examiner took the stand, the testimony was devastatingly clear. The medical testimony confirmed that Austin Metcalf was stabbed exactly once. There was no wild struggle with multiple strikes. It was a single, precise chest wound. The state utilized this specific, fatal wound to anchor their legal argument. They used the medical examiner's findings to show that introducing a lethal blade against an unarmed push constituted a non-proportional escalation. If you are not familiar with how Texas statutory guidelines work, the law requires force to be proportional. If someone shoves you, you are legally allowed to defend yourself against that shove. But you are not legally allowed to escalate an unarmed scuffle into a lethal encounter unless you have a reasonable belief that your life is in imminent, immediate danger of death or severe bodily harm. The prosecution built their entire case on this documented sequence of events. By presenting the testimonies of over 12 individuals present at the scene, the state argued that the events unfolded exactly as described by the students under the tent. They argued that there was no hidden context or unseen threat that justified what happened. Austin told him to leave, Karmelo issued a warning, Austin grabbed him, and Karmelo used a deadly weapon. The forensic logs from the medical examiner were used to strictly corroborate the witness accounts of that single strike. According to the court transcripts, the legal framework for the entire trial hinged on this concept of proportional force. The state argued forcefully that Austin Metcalf's action of grabbing Anthony to remove him from the tent, while physical and confrontational, did not warrant the introduction of a concealed weapon. Justice said that you cannot answer a push with a knife. The police said the investigation showed a clear overreaction to a standard physical conflict. And ultimately, the jury had to sit in that room and weigh these two realities. They had to look at a 19-year-old defendant who claimed he was acting out of fear, and they had to look at the grieving family of a 17-year-old boy who lost his life over a dispute in a tent. The jury's guilty verdict and the resulting 35-year sentence indicate that they fully accepted the prosecution's timeline. They accepted the testimonies of the dozen witnesses, and they accepted the medical examiner's physical evidence over the defense's argument of a hostile environment and sudden passion. They looked at the facts and decided that the boundaries of self-defense were broken the second that folding knife was pulled. So, following everything we just broke down about how the jury viewed that single fatal strike, we have to look at the immediate aftermath and the environment. One of the most frequent questions being raised on social media right now, and I see it in the comments all the time, is a really fundamental one. Where were the adults? Why was there no older person present to stop this escalation before it became fatal? It is a natural question to ask when you hear about a group of teenagers getting into a lethal altercation at a sanctioned school event, right? When you look at the investigative files, the police said that adult supervision was absolutely present at the stadium. We are talking adult coaches, school administrators, and school resource officers who were actively deployed throughout the athletic complex. But you have to picture the geography of a massive high school track meet. These adults were stationed at the primary security gates, the field checkpoints, and the main field houses to manage the overarching flow of the event. They were doing their jobs exactly where they were supposed to be. But then, the weather completely changed the dynamic. When the sudden downpour hit, the normal structure of the event fell apart. Dozens of students scrambled into localized team tents simultaneously just to get out of the rain. It created these little isolated pockets of chaos. The verbal dispute between Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony and the subsequent physical contact escalated within a matter of minutes. All of this happened inside a crowded student area, completely out of the direct line of sight of stadium supervision. Wow, it is just terrifying to think about. This structural gap allowed a standard schoolyard dispute to turn critical before adult intervention could physically occur. By the time any adult realized what was happening inside that specific tent, the knife had already been pulled, the strike had already happened, and a young man's life was ending. This case has created a profound, deep split among followers online, and it carries distinct risks and perspectives for both sides. I see how deeply people feel about this, and you can understand why. Two families are living a nightmare. For the followers and supporters of the Metcalf family, the consistent eyewitness counts from the students in the tent and the forensic logs offer solid validation. For them, the court said the 35-year sentence represents necessary legal accountability for a life taken. Jeff Metcalf lost his son forever. From their perspective, the justice system worked exactly as it was designed to. A crime was committed, the evidence was presented, the police said the physical boundaries were crossed, and a jury handed down a sentence. But on the other side of this tragedy, you have Karmelo Anthony's followers. For them, the parents' highly visible public media statements offer a sliver of hope. When Andrew Anthony and Kala Hayes go on television and talk about how their son retreated to a teacher, they are arguing that there is a procedural omission in how the jury viewed the case. They are trying to show the world that the narrative of a cold-blooded attack does not match a teenager running to an adult for protection while allegedly being chased. However, the legal danger here remains absolutely immense. I need you to really understand this part because it is something a lot of people cheering for an appeal do not realize. If an appeal actually succeeds, it does not mean Karmelo Anthony just gets to walk out of prison and go home. A successful appeal usually results in a total case reset. That means a second trial. And if they go to a second trial, it could carry an even higher sentence of up to 99 years or life in prison. The stakes are unimaginably high. It is a massive gamble. But for parents fighting for their son's freedom, it is a gamble they feel they have to take. This raises critical, fact-based questions for us to evaluate as a society watching this unfold. We have to strip away the emotion for a second and look at the raw mechanics of the law. First, under Texas statutory guidelines, if an unarmed individual initiates physical contact by grabbing someone to remove them from a location, does the immediate introduction of a concealed folding blade constitute a lawful act of self-defense, or does it legally violate the boundaries of proportional force? The court said it violated that boundary. The jury decided that you cannot answer a physical grab with a lethal weapon. But as we watch these media interviews, we have to ask if the public fully understands where the line of self-defense is actually drawn. You cannot just claim self-defense because you were scared. The law requires the threat to match the response. Second, when evaluating a fast-moving, chaotic confrontation, should a jury prioritize the immediate eyewitness descriptions of the students at the scene, or should subsequent actions, such as a defendant retreating toward a school teacher for protection, dictate the final evaluation of intent? This is the core of the parents' argument. They want the focus on the retreat. They want the focus on the teacher's testimony about holding back another student. But the police said the crime happened inside the tent before the retreat ever occurred. How do you balance those two realities? How do you weigh a chaotic 5 seconds of violence against the chaotic 5 seconds that immediately followed it? And third, when public media statements by a defendant's family directly challenge the consistency of courtroom witness logs, does withholding the official trial video protect the integrity of the active appellate process, or does it cause unnecessary public confusion? Right now, the public is arguing over surveillance video they have not even seen. The parents say the video proves their son was running for his life. The court said the evidence proved he committed murder. When the public does not have access to the raw footage, social media fills the void with theories, and that creates a really volatile environment for everyone involved. Looking completely past the courtroom walls, past the legal definitions, and past the media tours, this tragic sequence leaves an essential, sobering lesson for families everywhere. I really want you to hear this. It serves as an urgent reminder for parents to actively talk to their kids and teens. We have to talk to them about the dangers of bullying behavior, about how quickly words can turn into pushing. But equally, we have to teach them never to carry harmful objects, knives, or weapons into school environments. An instant of physical friction can cause irreversible devastation. Just think about Austin Metcalf. He went to a track meet, got into a brief argument over a tent in the rain, and lost his life. Think about Karmelo Anthony. He carried a pocket knife, made a split-second decision during a scuffle, and lost 35 years of his freedom. 2 lives, 2 families, completely destroyed over a matter of seconds. We have to encourage our teenagers to maintain absolute discipline. Teach them to stay completely out of trouble. Teach them to leave unwelcome premises immediately the moment they detect hostility or feel unwanted. If someone tells you to leave a tent, just walk out into the rain. Getting wet is better than getting into a fight. Walking away is the single decision that preserves your future. It takes so much more strength to walk away than it does to stand your ground. As we close this analysis, let us remember to keep a clean, respectful perspective on all of this. These are real people living through their darkest days. Take a moment to pray for Austin's soul. He was a 17-year-old kid who had his entire life ahead of him. And also remember to pray for Karmelo Anthony and both of these families navigating this painful, heavy reality. The trial might be over on paper, but the pain is going to last a lifetime for everyone involved. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. Crime Cases, thank you for staying till the end. Please hit that button, drop your respectful thoughts below.